This episode is sponsored by quality and innovative Game Bore cartridges. Game Bore shot shells are the choice of world champion David Radulovich and 26 times world champion George Digweed MBE. White Gold and Dark Storm contain precision-made diamond shot, manufactured exclusively in England, and coupled with high-performance smooth velocities, providing less felt recoil. If you're serious about your scores, you have to shoot with the best. When every clay counts, make sure you never compromise. Game Bore is the most decorated FITASC and sporting clay shot shells in the sport's history. Available now throughout the U.S., exclusively from KL Ammo. Find them online at www.GameBoreUS.com. Game Bore are simply the champion's choice.
American-made Atlas traps are made right here in Kansas and feature the finest quality, innovation, and support in the business. Atlas traps are made using aircraft-quality aluminum and stainless steel to ensure your traps will outlast the competition.
So whether you're an individual needing a private trap for practice and recreation, or a club needing to outfit your entire facility, family-owned and operated Atlas Traps can suit all your needs.
Visit atlastraps.com to see the full line of commercial and recreational traps and accessories. With prices that won't make you see red and quality that won't leave you feeling blue, Atlas has the finest equipment available.
Welcome to the Dead Pair Podcast with your hosts, Jason Rambo and Sean Alley. We bring you all things sporting clays. Our focus is bringing new shooters to the sport and helping all shooters by giving you the most useful info from coaches, pro shooters, gun clubs, product and service specialists. The Dead Pair Podcast, what every shotgun shooter wants to hear.
Paul?
Dead Pair!
Hey everyone, welcome to the Dead Pair Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Rambo, with the man that's large and in charge, Mr. Sean Alley.
There you go. Glad you got it right this time.
How you doing, bud?
Good, man. Kind of excited about tonight. It's going to be we got a couple of heavyweights on.
Yes. Welcome everyone to the great episode number 25. Can you believe 25 episodes already?
I know. It's been flying by.
With David Radulovich and Anthony Matarese. This is going to be a coach's debate. This was actually David's idea, so credit to him. Let's hope he shows up on time. And we're going to have a little debate here about some coaching questions, and I'm hoping that all of you get a lot out of this. We've kind of structured some questions here that we wrote down that is going to bring some things to light that will eventually help the shooters and coaches alike. So,
yeah, and these are pretty hot topics. These come up all the time.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see what these guys say and what their opinions are.
Yeah, this is either going to silence the keyboard warriors or it's going to put them in overtime.
One way or the other. One way or the other.
So what's new with you, man? Anything coming up?
Going to be shooting this weekend. I'm going to try my first round of AFS, so I'm very excited to shoot that.
About time.
I think we're shooting the Whitefield, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So really looking forward to that. And I did get a chance to go out and do some practicing with the White Golds from Game Bore. And man, those are pretty impressive shells.
Nice shells, aren't
Pretty
they?
impressive shells.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's not just the sponsorship that makes me want to say that. I mean, I've shot a lot of just about every single type of ammo there is out there.
Yep.
For shotguns, and I'm really impressed with the breaks at distance. And I stress at distance because any shell inside of 35 yards will smoke a target.
Yeah, typically.
But when you get out and you're 50, 60, some of these 70-yard shots, I think that's where shells really separate themselves from the others.
Well, it's the quality of the components,
right?
And you're basically shooting a competition shell.
That's right.
Not a practice shell or a target shell or a multi-purpose shell. It's specifically meant to do this job.
Yep, for sure. Well, hey, listen, I don't want to waste too much time here because I know these guys have got a lot to say, and I'm anxious to hear it.
Oh, I can't wait, man. I can't wait.
Let's see if I can lasso Mr. Radulovich onto the phone here.
Good luck.
RE Ranger, you can't hit what you can't see. With 14 clay sight lenses manufactured by Carl Zeiss Vision, Ranger lenses add target clarity and contrast no matter the lighting condition. Visit reranger.com for all your shooting eyewear needs. Free shipping and returns in the U.S. on orders of $90 or more. And if you use the code DEADPAIR at checkout, you will save 10% off your order. See it further, see it faster, see it with precision with RE Ranger. All right, we are very privileged to have Mr. Anthony Matarese and David Radulovich on the phone with us. How you guys doing this evening?
Oh, good. Can't complain. A little muddy, but other than that.
Well, I hear you need some operating coaching, David.
Well, let's just say don't try to go after a beaver with an excavator. It doesn't work too good.
Do tell.
Yeah. Well, we'll get right into it because we've got a ton of questions for you guys. The first one we have is for Anthony. Anthony, when it comes to coaching, one of the biggest topics amongst shooters that pops up is what style or method of shooting does the coach teach them? In other words, whether it's swing through, maintained, or pull away. And, you know, which of these is your preferred method and why?
Good question. I'll give you a little history. I would say I learned to shoot primarily as a base technique. As a kid, I learned to shoot primarily pull away. I would say my game today is probably 40% pull away, 40% maintain lead, and 20% swing through personally. So I teach basically all of them. So if I have someone who shows up and they shoot maintain lead well, and I don't think it costs them birds, then I allow them to do that. If I have someone that I think it costs them targets, depending on just the individual, then I'll teach them to do something different on certain shots. Every student, I tell them this: I'll change you as little as possible, but as much as necessary. So, little as possible means if I don't think it's actually costing you a target, then I don't change it. Necessary being that if I think you could be better off doing something else, then we're going to change it. So I learned as primarily a pull away shooter. I shoot probably FTAS 80% maintain, 70-80% maintain. Sporting, I shoot probably 40% pull away, 40% maintain, and 20% swing through.
All right. Do we want to give David a chance to reply to that?
Yeah, sure. Anthony, just out of curiosity, what kind of birds do you shoot a swing through on? Anything that takes no lead. Okay. So by definition, swing through means you're behind the bird. So it's really not it's not much different than pull away or maintain lead if the bird takes zero lead. Because swing through, I would say, just means you start behind it. Doesn't mean when you come to the bird, you fire. So you could start behind the bird and still maintain it, theoretically. Right. So anything that takes no lead or small lead, I'll start from behind. And then particularly in FTAS, if it takes no lead or a small lead, I definitely start behind, more so in FTAS than even in sporting. It's more forgiving to me.
Gotcha. David, what is your preferred method for teaching?
So that's basically the way that I shoot it. I'm not really ever talking about or focusing on methods too much. So what I'm going to be talking about a lot is how you're. Hold on 1 second. I really apologize. My dog grabbed a water bottle and is making a crap ton of noise. So like what I'm going to be focusing on is physical movements, and that kind of generally leads to what happens to be a sustained lead or maintained lead, whatever you want to call it. Just kind of answering the same way that Anthony did. My history was that I learned to shoot a sustained lead, but kind of the way that I teach, I would say actually it's probably for the same reasons that Anthony does what he does. I just do the opposite thing. So like if a bird requires no lead, I actually shoot that in a collapsing lead. But all of it really has to do with I'm just really, instead of trying to focus on doing something with how I see the bird-barrel relationship, I'm trying to do something with how I kind of feel that space happening in my rotation, so to speak. So that's why I tend to start big and go small, meaning more of a collapse lead or a sustain lead, because it's harder for me to feel an acceleration of rotation than it is for me to feel almost like I'm letting the bird catch up into me.
Gotcha. Is that enough?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next question. And both of you, I'm sure, can understand this. So, the dedication that a student puts in is obviously the biggest, step towards their success when they're working with a coach. So when you have a student that continually wants to come to you for lessons, but when they come back for the next lesson, they're not doing the homework that you assign them to do, and you realize that, at that point, do you shut them down and turn them away, or do you just keep giving them lessons? I mean, what's the theory on what you guys would do in that kind of a situation? And we'll go with David first on this one.
Yep.
Sure. I think any good coach just probably should realize that, you're there for the student more than anything. And so if you have a guy, people come to Anthony and I and other instructors for different reasons, like there's people that were like Anthony and I, where, I was taking lessons because I wanted to accomplish the highest level possible in the game. And so I put a lot of work into it, and I was doing all the homework I was given and then more. And then there's people on the total opposite end of the spectrum that really are just coming because they enjoy the game and it's a lot of fun, and it's even more fun if they're more proficient at it. And there's no right or wrong reason to take lessons. And there's no right or wrong reason to compete or shoot. In fact, I have a guy here right now who has been taking lessons from me for 2 years, has never shot a registered tournament before, and he really just loves to learn. So if I have a student that, is taking a lot of lessons and not doing any of the homework that I'm giving him, then, the first thing that's going to happen is a conversation. So, and that, if previously they've expressed to me that they want to, get to the level where they can be competitive at the highest level of the game, and they're not doing that, then I need to tell them, if this is what your expectation is in this game, this is the input of work required to get that. Maybe you don't know that yet. But if they say, look, my goals have changed, I want to do this for fun, that's fine. Or if they've never told me that or communicated to me the reason why they want to do it, it really is the coach's job to determine the purpose for them learning. And then if at the end of that conversation, if you find out that they're, I'm sure Anthony has students like this where they just take lessons because they like the time spent with you and they enjoy the lesson and it's fun for them. And so that's why they're doing it. If that's the case, then they don't really need to be doing the homework. But if their goals are aligned to where they should be doing the homework and they're not, then it's, my job to figure out why not. And maybe there's another way to do the work. There might be more drills that are less boring or monotonous, or we can find other ways to work through that. But I'm never going to fire a student. That's not my position to do that. I'm sure I could get fired, but I'm not going to fire, somebody that's wanting to come back and learn. That's all about enjoying the game and having fun.
Gotcha. All right, Anthony, what do you say?
Yeah, I would say David's answer is very good. People come for lessons for all reasons. Like he said, people want to get to the highest level. There are people that want to shoot better than they currently shoot, but the time that they spend with you doing a lesson is basically like an accelerated practice to them. Mm-hmm. I have 2 or 3 students that I almost see weekly to sometimes twice in a week. Okay. And it's obviously a significant investment in money to do that. And, so sometimes I've said, look, you got to get out and practice. The response I've had from some of these people is, look, when I go out and practice with you, that, out and take a lesson with you, that is my practice. I only get out once to twice a week. And quite frankly, one gentleman actually asked me this exact question. He goes, can you give me a good reason why, if I can only get out once a week, why you shouldn't be there with me?
Good question.
Right. And I said, well, I can't give you a good reason except that cost you $450 every Wednesday. Okay.
Right.
He goes, well, that's a non-issue because the reason I'm busy is because I'm working all the time and I don't have time to go practice. So $450 is inconsequential. Okay. to my week. Okay. So can you give me another reason,
Gotcha.
And the answer is no. Okay. So if I only had one time to practice, basically the guy's question was, if I had one question that you could answer in my 2 hours of practice, then it was worth the $450. Okay. That's not for everybody. Okay. Most people have to get more of a value out of their lesson than that. So they're not going to come once a week. So David's answer is spot on. Here's the only thing I would add to that outside of what I just described about the person who's coming to because they enjoy it and they have the opportunity and the resources to do it. The only thing I would add to it is, which David mentioned, is you just have to be transparent with the person. If the person thinks they're going to achieve X, Y, and Z, and they're not doing what they need to accomplish that, then you have to let them know. You can't have them show up every second month, 6 times a year for a lesson, and they're not advancing the ball down the court, and they're wondering why. Because at the end of the day, you have an obligation. They're spending money with you to tell them what they need to do to get from point A to point B. I've had people that say, I want to be people that are capable. I want to average 90% in 2022. So I said, all right, well, you got to get out there and, you average, 77% now. I think you're capable. But you're going to get out there and shoot 500 rounds a week, and you're probably going to have to do 4,000 to 5,000 registered targets this year if you're going to go from a 77 up to being able to get around 90. Okay, that's bare minimum. Okay, well, the guy shoots 1,000 birds a week, but he tells me that he's can only do maybe 1,500, 2,000 registered targets a year with his family obligations, et cetera. So the answer is you're not going to be a 90% shooter. Okay. You're not going to get to 90% in a year doing 1,500, 2,000 registered targets. You better do 5,000 and keep up your practice. So, that's the honesty that the person needs. I have many scenarios like that. Guy last year told me he wants to be competitive on a local level. Like, what do you mean by being competitive? Like, shoot up there with the top guys in my area. Okay, well, you're only practicing twice a month. It's never going to happen. Okay,
Yeah, right.
that's the guy goes, I'm really disappointed to hear that. Well, that's the truth. Yeah. 2021, I haven't had the guy back for a lesson. Okay, 0.
Cold hard facts, though.
He might quite frankly have quit because of what I haven't seen him since. Okay. So, but that's the truth, right?
Right.
So I would say as long as you tell the truth, doesn't matter. The guy can come back every time, as long as they know where they are and what they stand. And I think on the student side, they can't be afraid to ask. Sometimes, if you're a new student, it's a little bit of a bizarre question from the coach saying, all right, what do you want to accomplish? Right. You're first just trying to get the guy to learn some of your techniques. And sometimes the person doesn't even know what they want to accomplish at that point. Right. So it can be a little bit of a tough question because they don't even know how to answer it sometimes. And they really just want to, sometimes if they're a newer student to you, they just want to see where you are and where you can take their game. So at some point that question, I think as a coach, when someone comes to me and tells me this is what I'd like to do, I think the person saying that and not being afraid to say that is a good thing. Yeah. Because it kind of puts it out there on the table, and you have to be honest with the person.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, and along that same line, I want to follow up with that, and I'll start with Anthony first. Okay. And you both mentioned this kind of in a roundabout way. So let's take a shooter, and they're getting into the sport. Everybody starts off in D class these days, and they kind of have to learn for a while. They got to shoot for a while to kind of figure out their game. As they progress, they probably figure out at some point they need a coach. So they go to a coach, they spend time with the coach, maybe a year or so. And I guess as time goes on, as a student, what if you have questions in your mind about has my coach taken me as far as I can go? What advice would you give to that person, and what should that shooter be looking for, like, at the next level? So let's say the guy started in D class. He's worked his way up through C, B. He's now an A. He's a fairly decent shooter, and he's going to lessons with his coach. He's not feeling like he's working hard anymore. He feels like it's kind of a routine thing. Would you advise that shooter to maybe look into another coach, a more, a higher level NSCA instructor or a professional? How would you approach that situation, or what kind of advice would you give a shooter in that situation, Anthony?
It's a good question, and at the end of the day, there's some personal judgment there on the student's behalf, doing a little bit of research about your coach, seeing people that they've helped achieve different levels, whatever that it is that they're trying to achieve. And the level that the person is trying to achieve is partly the question, or the answer to the question, quite frankly. Am I stuck? Should I be looking for a new coach? Well, if your coach has never coached anyone to get any higher than the level that you're currently at, then yes, you probably should be looking for someone else. Okay.
Yeah,
right.
If they've coached many people to get to a higher level and they have a good reputation, et cetera, then the answer is probably that you need more hard work, and you got to, there gets to a point in a lot of people's game where, the success comes much more slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And that depends on a lot of levels. Depends on just the person's inherent capabilities, et cetera. And it depends also just on the game is difficult. So, it's pretty easy to go from 60 to 80. It's very hard to go from 80 to 90. So
right.
That's just the reality of the game. So if the person's stuck in the low to mid 80s and their coaches shows past qualifications to take other people higher than that, then it's probably not the coach,
Right.
It's probably the point that you are in the game. And I think people can get stuck in that 80 to 85 range for a good period of time before that they can break out of it. Some people pass through it fast, other people don't. It depends on multiple factors: how long you started, when you started, how old you were, what your issues are with eye dominance, how coordinated you are, how much you're practicing, how much just inherent ability that you have. Not that that's the number one factor, but it matters. Okay, there's people that become an 88 shooter pretty easily. There's people that have a hard time getting to 80. The coach isn't the only determining factor of that. So the answer to your question is, if your coach has qualifications to get people past your level, particularly multiple scenarios where they have achieved it, then you probably don't need a new coach. If there is some disconnect, there are scenarios where the individual has some disconnect, whether it be a complicated case of eye dominance, a complicated case of their past experience and what their past approach was, et cetera, where even if they have a qualified coach, they're not quite matching up with who they have. Yeah, I guess there's those scenarios where, it's not the student and you might need to find someone that's better for you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I think look at the person's credentials historically, and that'll kind of tell you a little bit of your answer.
Right.
Gotcha.
That's well said, Anthony. David, what's your response to that?
I mean, yeah, I'd agree with Anthony. I think that, if the student believes that they should be in a place better than where they are at that current moment, and they're starting to, doubt the ability of the coach, I think that there needs to be a conversation had between those two people. Because if any instructor that's had, not just like students as a business where you're getting people that are cycling through and you're teaching a lot, but what I'm going to talk about is somebody who's like an actual long time developed client, where as a coach you get to build them from start to finish. That's a lot different than giving lessons, just booking tons of hours. There's a huge difference between improving somebody's game quickly, with lessons here and there versus building a competitor. And if you feel like you've chosen a coach, and this is the person you say, look, I'm coming to you at this place in my game, and I want to work with you for as long as I need to for you to develop me into this is what I want, X, Y, Z, whatever final goal it is, and you feel like you're stuck there, and you can't get to where you're trying to go, and you're doubting the ability of the coach. I think probably what needs to happen is a conversation about what all are we including in the training. Because, there's so much more to learning to compete and win and perform really well in competition than there is just getting good shooting the gun in practice. Anthony talked about it I think it was the first question that he answered when he said, you need to be shooting about 5,000 registered birds and 500 to 1,000 targets a week in practice. That 5,000 registered birds in a year is hugely important, because you learn how to compete as who you are as a human being, not just how you can move the gun when you're trying to follow targets through the air. And if your coach hasn't talked to you about, basically competition, not just how to move the gun, but how to compete on the road, the mental aspect of shooting, or hooked you up with somebody that can really specialize in that aspect of the game, talk to you about probability analysis and learning how to read pairs and make strategy choices in the round, talk, all the kind of stuff that you need to learn to put up a good number. Then you maybe you do need to talk to another coach or say, like, look, you've been teaching me to shoot, but I want to learn how to compete, and I want to grow, more as a competitor. And I would say that, an instructor that's had students like that before is going to be the kind of guy that Anthony's talking about, where, if you look at their previous resume, they have people that they have brought up through the ranks that have been able to be successful on their own. I know, for me, learning the game as I was coming up, I had instruction from a few different people really early on. In fact, actually, Anthony was the first person to give me the first pro at the time to give me a lesson. I don't know if you remember that, Anthony, but
on our 5 stand right behind the clubhouse.
Yeah. Do you remember were you just going to college that next year or something?
I can't remember. I can remember when my mom called me. So there's some kid here. He wants to meet you and see if you'll help him with his shooting. It was like right during a tournament. I'm like, what? She's like, some real little kid. He really wants to meet you. I'm like, all right, I'll come up there. It's like we're in the middle of us hosting the tournament.
Right.
Yeah. And you realized he was such a basket case, you sent him off to Wendell.
Yeah. You're like, this guy's freaking crazy.
I remember it. I definitely remember it. What year was it?
Oh, man, I don't know. I bet you that was like 2002, maybe.
I went to college in 2004. I graduated 2003, actually. So
yeah, I know you were in high school. It was probably 01 or 02. But anyway, so while I was learning, when Wendell was the guy that taught me from basically the age of 10 to whenever. And while I was learning through him, not only did he teach me how to move the gun, but, I learned how to compete from him. I shot with him on his squad. I would travel with him to shooting tournaments. I would, and you kind of try, and you basically learn everything about competition, and not just shooting. But I would say if you don't feel like your coach can teach you that stuff, another pathway is if your instructor has too much of an ego to say, hey, look, you really need to go to an eye specialist to work out this eye dominancy. Let me hook you up with Colo, or verse, oh, I can handle that. That's a big difference. Or if they feel like if they're going to say, oh, I can teach you everything about the mental game that you need to know, or are they going to say, hey, let me connect you with this guy? I think there's a lot of questions involved in that, in what you're asking. But if you feel like you got the right guy, stick with them. But the biggest thing to getting better faster is open communication between the student and the coach, understanding where that person is wanting to go in their game, and then understand what all they're willing to do to work for it. You might be throwing in, I have some students that, physical fitness is part of the routine that we're working on. Visual fitness, working on visual synaptic training is part of the program. There's so many things you can do, and it's all about what is the student willing to do? What is the coach willing to offer? How inclusive is that relationship going to be? And do those two things match up? If so, you got the right guy. If not, go find another one.
Right. That's well said. And, Sean and I's coach works with us on all of that. So for now, until we start beating him, I know we've got the right guy. But, that speaking of Bill, and you also brought up eye dominance, which leads into our next question. Anthony, I'd like to start with you. This is a two-part question. Eye dominance is a huge issue. First part of the question, is this something that is still continuously misdiagnosed? And then the second part of that is, if you discover a shooter that has an eye dominance issue, do you retrain them to shoot the same side as the dominant eye? In other words, if they're left-handed, you try to push them into left-handed shooter, or do you teach them to shoot with one eye closed? What do you think?
Good question. So it's probably, when it gets down to it, it's probably the hardest part of my job is doing that, making decisions and making the decisions accurately. There's a lot going on with eye dominance because it's a degree. Pretty much all of Colo's stuff, him and I have worked on together for probably as much as 10 years now. I've basically been the guy who, he goes, what do you think about this? I'm like, well, I'll try it. Oh, that don't work. Wrong. Try again. Okay. So it's very complicated. It's misdiagnosed all the time. If you're a shooting coach and you don't think you've done it wrong, you're 100% wrong because you have. Okay. It's very complicated, right? You can think you have it for a moment. Okay. But sometimes you don't know until you have it, until 6 months later. Okay. That you have it pinned. When the person's looking at the target, eye dominance isn't a big deal. Okay. Unless they're right-handed, left eye dominant. Right-handed, left eye dominant, you've got to make some change probably. Okay. Or vice versa, left-handed, right eye dominant. There are people though that test right-handed 100% left eye dominant. And I have some people that do shoot with both eyes open on their non-dominant side. It defies all testing. It defies all logic, but they actually do it. Okay. And wow. Some of them do it pretty well. The problem with eye dominance is that we can only see a moment in time when we determine what the person should do. So if someone shows up for me today and I test their eyes and they go, yeah, somebody had me shooting with a dot. Okay. All right, let me test your eyes. Well, you're kind of center dominant. Let's see how you do without it. Okay. If I get the person looking at the bird, they're going to do great without the dot. Okay. They're going to hit everything. If I get them smooth and probably out of the gun, unmounted, the more you're out of the gun, the less eye dominance is a problem. Okay. And I get them shooting, working their gun mount and looking at the clay and seeing the target well. I could say that, hey, the person that told you to put that dot on there was wrong. You're center dominant. Look, we got you hitting everything today. And we think we're right. Okay. But that assumes you're looking at the bird. Okay. As soon as you look at the gun, which is what you're going to do under pressure, now you got eye dominance problem.
Right.
Gotcha. So looking at the bird hides most of eye dominance problems. However, when most people miss under pressure, it's because they check the process. Myself included and Dave included. Okay. So if I miss something I shouldn't have, it's because I didn't trust my hands, my eyes. Okay. Well, if I can do that wrong, the guy that's in C class that's center dominant, he's going to do that wrong all the time under pressure. Okay. So they can have drastic variations in results with eye dominance. So we don't know with certainty the person who tests 90% right eye, that we don't know for certain that they're going to have no problems. And we don't know for certainty that the guy that only tests that's right eye dominant but only tests 10%, or 50-50, that he's going to have as much problem. So giving you the long and the short is there's no absolutes. That's the problem. It's a case-by-case basis.
Right.
And what we figure out on one day, unfortunately, doesn't mean as much as most people think. Okay. I just had a guy today. I've worked with this guy for like 2 years, 2 to 3 times a year. He hardly does no tournaments, but he takes the game seriously. He practices once to twice a week. He doesn't shoot a ton, but he's shoots a case a week every week for 2-3 years, done a couple small tournaments. He tests like center dominant. Okay. When I first got him shooting, like, we'll leave both eyes open. We'll see what happens. He couldn't hit a crosser to save his life just because he didn't know any technique. He shot everything fully mounted, locked in the gun, head down, looking at the barrel. Okay. Got him out of the gun, got his eyes open. He's hitting more crossing birds than he ever did in his life. Okay. So his shooting went from 35-40% to 60% instantly because he can hit stuff that takes lead. What we've realized over the last year, which I knew basically a year ago, but I still had him basically trying to work on it, is anything that takes no lead, he struggles. Okay. So his scoring, while it went from 40% to 60% quickly, hasn't moved much past 60-65%, because if he gets on a basic course, he only hits 60 to 70% of the birds that don't take any lead. And the reason is because his eye's taken over. Okay. And I've had him working on it for a year, and guess what? Still taking over. He said he went to a little range the other day, went through, shot everything great, got to the second last stand, had a quartering bird. The trap he could almost touch the trap. He missed the first 10 of them in a row.
Wow.
He shut his right eye. He's left-handed. He shut his right eye. He hit 10 in a row. So to tell that guy that there's nothing wrong with your eye dominance is wrong. Okay. So could he work through it? Yeah, potentially, but he just tried working through it for the last year, and he got to the easiest bird on the course and he can't hit it. So could I spend 2 hours today trying to get him to hit it with 2 eyes? Sure. But the guy only hits 65% now anyway. So what I told him is, here's what you're going to do. We're going to chart down which birds you can't hit. And every one of those, right for now, you're going to keep both eyes open and just squint. Okay. And when you hit 75 or 80% all the time, we'll figure out what we're going to do next.
Yeah.
So that's a realistic solution. It's not the solution I would like. Okay. But it's the reality. So it's very complicated. It's misdiagnosed all the time. There's no one answer for everyone. Switching sides is not for everyone. If you're a little kid, I don't even tell you what side I don't even tell you. I just test your eye and say, hey, you're going to shoot left-handed or right-handed. But if you're 60 years old and you show up and you're right-handed, you're left eye dominant, depending on your coordination, it might be for you. Depending on your dedication, it might be for you. If you're going to go out a handful of times every year or even twice a month, you're probably not going to switch sides at 50 years old.
Right.
Okay. If you're going to be out twice a week and you want to, win the veteran state championship, that's probably a good idea to switch sides. So it's very complicated. There's no absolutes. Everybody gets it wrong, myself included. I knew nothing about it compared to what I know about it now, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But I see a ton of people, and the unfortunate part is the only way you actually can really get a better handle on it, and you're not going to get it right every time. You're going to screw up. Okay. And if you think that you're not screwing up, then you're not going to be as good at it as you could be someday. Is you're going to mess up sometimes because there's no textbook for what to do, because it's a case by case basis and it's a degree. You need experience of people to know what to do. That's the part where, it's very, very complicated. In short, I think there's two answers with eye dominance if the person shoots with two eyes. One is, if you maintain your focus on the bird, your eye dominance will be less significant. The other answer is, if you see the gun and you know what the relationship looks like, you can fix it that way too. So I have people that can't hit a quartering bird. I'll say, put the gun on the back edge. They can hit it every time. Well, the gun's not really on the back edge, but that's where they think it is. Okay, so you can't shoot the back edge of a bird that's going forward. Okay, but if they put the gun on the back edge of that shot, they never miss it. The rest of the birds on the course, they don't have any problems with their eyes. So they know what the gun looks like on that shot, and that's really the definition of what eye dominance does. Is it changes the position of the gun relative to what you perceive it is versus what it actually is. So if you can teach them how they have to perceive it, if it's a subtle dominance issue, you can actually teach them to get rid of an eye dominance issue by seeing the gun. The school of thought is, which I agree with, is if you don't see the gun, eye dominance is less of a problem. The problem with that is everybody sees the gun. Okay.
Right.
The reality is, under pressure, you see the gun more than you're supposed to. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, true.
That's the hardest part of the game. So the guy that's struggling, he's going to see the gun more than he's supposed to as well, and that's when his eye is going to be a problem.
Yep. Gotcha. David, I'm curious to hear your answer, because I know you switched our coach.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. So Anthony's all right on all of that. Eye dominance is a really interesting thing. I think it's really fun, actually. I'm the same way. I basically should keep Colo on retainer because I'm calling him every week in lessons. And he is a huge asset to all of the guys that utilize him for their instruction. The reality of it is that eye dominance is exactly what Anthony said, is a hugely case by case basis. We can do a test on you to find a cyclopean position, which is essentially telling us where the visual cortex of the brain deciphers the two images coming from each eye into one and filters that into one image. Once we find that position, which is not just left or right or center, there's a spectrum of eye dominance that it gets very interesting. But once we find that position, there's a couple things that we can do. And I mean, there are, to give you an example, I have two students at the same club up in New York that test as the exact same eye dominance. Okay. But they have completely different results with the same, so in quote unquote, called solution. So with one guy, one solution works really well. With the other guy, it doesn't work at all. Okay, so if you're just bringing in the variable of what you test as in terms of eye dominance, then that doesn't hold to any mathematical or scientific value, because you're only measuring the same variables and they're coming out with different, with different results. So there's got to be a lot of other things involved in there. A lot of it has to do with the student's ability to control the bird visually. So what Anthony's talking about is if you see the bird really well. Another thing has to do with the psychological aspect of their shooting. How confident are they in the ability to not pay attention to the gun? Another thing has to do with their mechanics. So certain types of mechanics really play into the effectiveness of non-aligned eye dominance problem shooters. So if I'm shooting a mechanic, if I have a shooting style, right, that forces higher levels of barrel awareness, where basically I'm in the gun longer, then I'm going to have a harder time mastering that level of visual control that's required. Visual control meaning how much is, do you guys know what I mean if I were to say the convergent point of your eyes? So
Yes.
like the one point in three-dimensional space that both of your eyes are focused on. So that's visual control. And so if my mechanics for shooting are starting pre-mounted, locked into the gun, and the whole time that I'm calling pull and following the bird, I'm measuring lead, well, eye dominance is going to be a huge problem. But if we shoot a style that brings the gun out of the face for as long as possible, but still allows you to have control, well, then eye dominance is less of a problem. So if we can, the interesting thing about visual controls, it's actually a mechanic that we can work on outside of shooting. So we can learn to work our eyes better. That's one of the things I was talking about earlier with one of my students that does synapse training. So basically, he's strengthening the coordination of his eyes and becoming more self-aware about learning how and what to control with the eyes, with different depth perception, different types of focusing, different types of like utilization of using different parts of the vision to pick up different parts of the bird and different parts of the shot to basically acquire and manipulate visual control in different parts of the shot. So that way you're establishing 100% visual control at the moment that you trigger the shot. So there's three things that are really, really, really important to happen at the same time in the way that I teach. Number one, and this is if you have an eye dominance problem. Number one, we need you to ramp up or titrate your level of visual focus on the bird into 100%. So the highest level of detail that you can see the bird needs to happen at the same time that you've planned to break your shot, which needs to happen at the same time that you finish the mechanics of your move. So if we can do those three things at the same time with somebody that has an eye dominance issue, which really isn't that hard. It sounds complex because I use weird words, but it's not that hard. If we can do that, then the physical mechanic of that being that we're finishing the mount at the latest possible point in the line of the target into the break point, that brings away the barrel awareness, right? So if think of mounting the gun, so we can think about like a low gun feed task mount, right? Well, if you watch some people mount the gun low gun, they call pull, mount the gun to their face, follow the bird, and pull the trigger. I want you to mount the gun at the speed of the bird in your hands, so that way your mount takes the whole time of the bird from start to finish of the line into your break point. If we can do that, then at the same time, determine how long it takes you to acquire visual control on the bird. That's very easy. Where all you got to do, you can do it in a simple test one time. You call pull, look at the bird, and then you basically, in a way, pay attention to how long of the line of the bird it takes you to see the most amount of detail. And that's going to vary on the same bird in different days because of lighting, because of nutrition, because of sleep, because of hydration. So it's not something that we can find out one time and then know. But so we have to, really easy, just call pull, look at the bird, see when you find the detail. When you see the highest level of detail, that's a placebo for you acquiring visual control. Visual acuity, which is detail, is not super important in a scientific sense. It's just important in a psychological sense because it helps us think that we're looking at the bird really hard and I'm looking for the detail, and because of that, I don't see the gun. Okay, so we need to acquire 100% visual acuity, find how long it takes you to acquire that, start that amount of space before your break point. So kind of start at a soft focus and let's say it takes you 20% of the line to acquire 100% visual acuity on the bird. And let's say your break point is at the 80% mark of the line. Well, you're going to soft focus that bird until it hits the 60% mark. At the 60% mark, you're going to hard focus onto it because it takes you 20%. So by the time you get to your break point at 80%, you've now hit 100% acuity. That same time, you finished your mount. And then that's also your planned breakpoint. So if we can get those three things to happen, basically eliminates any problem with eye dominancy if we have the right gun fit and we've done the test and understand where you align to in terms of, where that cyclopean position is. But eye dominancy is not something that is a break the bank. I mean, Anthony's got a student, Roger Becker, that's a one-eyed shooter. He whipped my butt at the state shoot the last year. So, eye dominancy is not a problem. It's not something to be afraid of. I get it all the time. I would say if you have a normal amount of students, you're getting a student with a non-aligned eye dominancy issue, at least on a weekly basis. And it's always about trying to work with that student I do the same thing that Anthony was talking about. I have another guy down in Houston, and he has a really complex eye issue because he's got retinal scarring on his dominant eye, and I forget what it is. He measures basically what you would consider to be close to central eye dominancy, but it's not. It's like halfway in between the nose and his right eye, and he's right-handed. So his right eye has retinal scarring, and his left eye, he had a stroke, and it doesn't move very good. Okay, so that's a hard thing to deal with, right? Because the one doesn't move right, and the other one has retinal scarring.
Right.
So,
Wow.
Huge problem. And so we worked out, some things to you have to do a 120 field view test and figure out what parts of the retina don't work, find out where he has to look, sometimes off the line of a bird to actually even see the bird. But it's really confusing to the brain on what's happening because it's getting two really interesting images, sometimes double vision because of the left eye. So, but anyways, with that guy, we thought we had he came to me, he's like, look, I've been to everyone puts a patch on my left eye. I'm sorry, I said that wrong before. He measures somewhat left eye dominant as a right-handed shooter, but he's got retinal scarring on his right eye. So when other people patch his left eye, now he can't see with the right eye. That's there you go. That makes more sense.
Wow. So
he goes, I've tried everything. Nothing really works. And if you can't get this to work, I'm just going to put the gun down. So I'm like, oh, I got this. Don't worry. Right. So I say that, and I think I figure it out pretty quickly. And the one thing that you can do with people with eye dominancy is you can actually influence gun fit. So if you sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes if they have good visual control and they have good confidence in what they're doing, and which also is a fluid thing, like Anthony said, if you lose confidence in the middle of a round and pressure, you're going to look at the barrel more. But in certain circumstances, it works that you can create vertical separation of the eye over the barrel, so that the gun is lower outside of center ocular of your vision. So that way it's easier to have visual control because the barrel isn't so much in the center of your vision. But I did that. I did some other stuff with his eyes. I taught him some visual mechanics, and I changed his physical mechanics to bring the gun into the vision at the latest possible second. And it's like instant success, right? So he's killing targets, both eyes open, no patch, right-handed. And then he comes back to me in the last lesson. He's like, I lost. I can't figure out. I can't do anything right. He's like, it's been a huge struggle. So you go back, rework the visual mechanics, rework the physical mechanics, worked it out. It's worked really good again. Then he's been shooting some of the highest scores he's ever shot. But then he comes to me in another lesson. He goes, I was shooting awesome. I was sitting in like the low 90s, a couple of stations left, and it came to a bird with no lead, quartering incoming bird, and I couldn't hit a single one of them. I closed my eye, and then I hit all of them. So what do I do? Because I thought we were supposed to shoot with one eye open or both eyes open. It's like, well, I told him the exact same thing that Anthony said. I said, look, we're going to find a solution for the problem, but there's going to be some exceptions to the rule. On birds that force higher levels of barrel awareness, eye dominancy becomes more of an issue. And when that happens, then sometimes you have to run a self-analysis, and you got to say, look, am I seeing the bird really good right now? Am I trusting what I'm doing? Or Am I seeing more barrel? Is there trepidation in me pulling the trigger? Am I afraid? Am I looking at the gun more? Am I more aware of physical space around the barrel? Depending on your answer to that question, you're either going to have to squint an eye or you're going to have to keep both eyes open and trust the shot. And if you choose the wrong answer, it's going to be disaster either way. So it's a really, eye dominancy to me is a very fun thing because it's a cool learning process for both the student and the coach with every student that you get that's like it, because no two cases, even though if they test the same, no two cases are the same. And so you have to learn the person and how everything about them to give them a good solution to that. But I have to say that I don't think any of us would be where we are right now in understanding that if it wasn't for Colo, because he's a good dude.
Well, I give both of you credit because my frustration level, I would just at that point ask them how their golf game is.
Right, yeah, because I thought we had problems, Jason.
Gene Christmas, holy cow.
Okay, both of you have an interesting technique when it comes to your pre-shot routine. So when you're coaching a student, what or how do you recommend that they build their own pre-shot routine? David, let's start with you.
Sure. So I would say if you asked me that question 5 years ago, maybe a little bit more, I would have told you exactly what your pre-shot routine needs to be. And I would say you need to do this, and it needs to take this long, and it needs to have these things involved in it. You need to have, go through the list of what any sports psychologist will tell you that's important for a pre-shot routine. And that's what I would have told you. And I would have tried to make it as similar to mine because I know that works as possible. And it probably wouldn't have worked that good, but for about 10% of my students. The reality of it is that a pre-shot routine is if you want to get it good, I believe that it takes a lot of testing in the field. So I'm going to have to answer your question by giving you the story of how I came up with mine. And it's not easy, I don't think, because it requires a lot of work and a lot of maintenance, a lot of self-awareness, and a lot of, I guess self-awareness and studying yourself would be the same thing. But long story short, when I first started adapting a pre-shot routine into my shooting, I was basically under the assumption that I have to basically emulate my coach. Right. I have to do everything that he does in the same way that he does it because that's what works. That's the pre-shot routine. And at the time he's, winning a crap ton of tournaments. So obviously that's right. So I do that and I experienced a lot of success and I was down to a T. In fact, I mean, you could have called me a mini Wendell for a long time. And for real, because everything that I did, not just mechanically, but also in terms of the pre-shot routine was the same. And that's a really important stage, I think, to developing a good pre-shot routine. Not that you have to emulate your coach, but you have to, for at least a little while, have an extremely consistent pre-shot routine so that you develop enough data that you can go back and analyze what works and what doesn't in different situations. And if I'm always changing my pre-shot routine, I don't get a good enough data set to say, oh yeah, this works, that doesn't, because I've never really done the same thing more than once. So what I did was for a long time have a very consistent pre-shot routine. And as I would go, when I would find, like as you're shooting, sometimes there's a difference between really being committed and in the moment to your routine versus kind of feeling like you're going through the motions. If you're going through the motions of whatever it is that you're doing, throw that out because it's useless. And so I would over time, but through studying what I was doing, studying meaning just like I know what I do, write it down, and then compare my results. I used to write a journal for my tournaments, and I'd talk about what was consciously going on in my mind while I was shooting. Well, on events where I felt really present and in the moment and everything was working really good, what's my pre-shot routine? First, when I feel like I'm going through the motions and results aren't that good, what's my pre-shot routine? So by doing the same thing for a long enough amount of time, You develop a good enough set of data to where you can start to pick and choose what really works and boil it down to the most effective aspect of your pre-shot routine. Everybody is going to have, you can't emulate anybody because, at one point in my career, my pre-shot routine was like 36 seconds. And then now my pre-shot routine varies between 3 seconds and 15 seconds. Now, after you go through that period of developing, of doing the same thing extremely consistently all the time, whether you feel like it's working for you or not, then you start to learn more about yourself. And you can say, okay, well, look, when I was feeling this way emotionally, or when I got that much sleep that night, or when I nutritionally was feeding myself whatever, or if it was in this high pressure situation versus that high pressure situation, it either worked or it didn't. If you do the same thing long enough, you can find that, for me right now, if you were to watch 10 rounds, if you were to watch every one of my major competitions coming up in the next year, you'd probably say that I look like 10 different people. Sometimes I'm super long, really methodical. Sometimes I'm not. Because at this point in my game, I've shot enough doing the same thing over and over and over again that I understand, and I can almost immediately recognize when, by me trying to go through the cognitive process of running through a 30-second pre-shot routine, that's just not going to work that day. It's going to do more harm than good. But I can't tell my students to say, okay, you've only shot for a year and a half, and really depending on the day, of how you feel, I want you to either run a pre-shot routine or not. If I do that, they're never going to learn anything, and it's never really going to cement and have any effectiveness. So in developing the pre-shot routine, you need to go with the basic stuff first. Just look through. You can Google it. There's visualization. There's positive affirmation if you need that. There's physical relaxation. So there's you need to get tension out of your body so that you relieve anxiety, so that you increase acuity. There's a lot of just pretty standard basic things that you should probably start doing. After that, I'd say start off basic. Don't try to overcomplicate things. Don't watch me or Anthony doing a pre-shot routine on our longest days and say oh, that's what I need to do. Because
you'll jam up the whole tournament.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've always wondered why when I go shooting, it feels like there's no one on the course in front of me. But no. So that's what you should do. And then lastly, I would add, and at this point I've rambled on so much I don't really remember what the question was, but I was going to say that I would add that it's extremely important in your pre-shot routine that if, for my students, when I'm trying to help them with a pre-shot routine, not every student I'm at the point where I need to help them on, or that they even ever want to have that or need that. But on the ones that do, when I'm helping them with it, we'll record it, and I'll go back and we'll watch it on a phone or an iPad or TV, whatever. And literally every single thing that they're doing, I say, why are you doing that? Or what are you doing? If they don't have an answer, meaning if it's a consciously deliberate thing. So if the best example I can think of is Joe Finisi, right? So if you watch him, I was watching him at the super final for the World English in 2019. And when I was watching him, I was watching him touch his hat and then mess with his glasses and then flip his gun upside down twice. And then I forget what else he was doing. And someone asked me, why is he doing all that? And I remember being that guy. And I said, I bet that there was one point in time where his hat got in the way of his eye when he was shooting, and then it caused him to have a miss. Or same thing with the glasses. And I also bet one time that maybe he forgot to load a second shell in the gun called pull and miss. And so all of those things have habitually formed almost in a way by accident. They become part of his routine. He doesn't even realize he's doing it. And a couple months later, he was on another podcast, and they asked him about it. And he explained why he did every single one. And I was almost dead on. The thing about I was right with the hat or the glasses or whatever, but then the thing with the shell, he said that one time his buddy forgot to load a second shell, so that made him worried. Now he always checks. So there's a reason. There literally is a reason. If you're doing a weird physical movement, you don't have a reason for that, then you're just doing it because you're trying some level of emulation or whatever it is, and then that's not needed. Make everything you're doing purposeful. Have a reason for it. And then do it consistently until you have a good enough data set to understand what works and what doesn't. You might find out that you're Kevin DeMichael, and it's better to just call pull while you're closing the gun.
Wow. Interesting. All right. Well, Anthony, do you want to go ahead and take a stab at this one?
Yeah. I think a routine, in the most simplest sense of the term is needs to be exactly the definition of routine. It just needs to be the same thing over and over. So that alone, kind of answers the question for a lot of people, is that they don't do the same thing over and over. And that's look, you put it in Google, the definition of routine, it's X, Y, and Z, and turn around and do X, Y, and Z. So I think that, without being elaborate, I think that is important. I think that it has to flow. I don't think when you for most people, they have a routine. What I tell them to do is just formalize it so that they know what it is. So if you try to do something precise that's not close to what you're used to, then if you've been shooting a while, then now it doesn't flow. And if it doesn't flow, you're out of a routine. So you're stopping and starting, et cetera. So it should flow. It should be the same. All of my visualization within my routine is about seeing the bird. I do zero visualization within my routine in the cage about how I'm going to shoot the target. All of my visualization related to like technique and approaches, I do outside the box. If I had to guess, Dave used to see what he was going to do kind of inside the box. He probably eliminated some of that.
I eliminated a lot.
Right.
He's not looking. He's not looking for the witches anymore, right?
Right.
So,
sometimes
I do all of my visualization of what I'm going to do and how I'm going to approach the bird out of the box, and then in the box, I just see the bird how I want to see it when I pull the trigger. So I do have visualization, but it's just about the target, about how I'm going to see the clay, whether it's clear or unclear, or very clear, or whatever it's going to be. For students, I tell them basically exactly what we just said. The thing that I would say that is very accurate that Dave said is you have to know when you feel X, what are you gonna do? Okay, so if you're less experienced, you don't know what feeling X means, so you don't know what you're going to do different. So it's hard to change your routine. But I think that's also is when someone has a really bad day and they don't know why, is they just did the same thing over and over and it wasn't working. So I just shot in the Western Regional the first day. Literally before I even shot my first shot, my forearm cracked in half, okay, in the main event.
Ooh.
At the first station, completely in half. I had to tape it together, and it was moving, et cetera. It was held together by about half-inch of wood. The rest of it was completely cracked in half from the right side of the barrel all the way to the left side. Jeez. I missed the bird on my first stand, just not having my mind in the right place, And then after that, it really wasn't because of my forearm, but I just got in the wrong frame of mind, and I missed one bird at the next 6 stations. Okay, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, down 6, the first 6 stands, and I probably should have missed only the bird that I definitely missed because of thinking about my forearm, and the rest, if I wanted an excuse, I could say that it was my forearm, but it was really that I sucked mentally after I missed one because of my forearm. So my routine wasn't working, okay? And my routine's been pretty good. My routine and my mind has been pretty strong. So, but what I knew is what I'm doing is not working. And I literally just abbreviated everything. I ran the last 7 stands, and they were some of the harder stands. So that was, and I only had an average score, but I could have had a terrible score. Okay. But I knew the way that I felt, and I was trying to do something that I've come to the conclusion I had to do something different. So to the point of Dave, a less experienced shooter is not going to know that. But they have to kind of figure, I just told someone today, I'm like, you got to know when you feel a certain way, what you're going to do. Are you going to shoot the bird faster? Are you going to shoot the bird slower? Are you going to worry more about looking at the clay? You're going to worry less about looking at the clay. So, that's something that you can't really give the person an answer for because it's partly experience based, but you can tell them to be on the lookout for, so that then they understand, that you're basically, I would say at the end of the day, it boils down to your level of confidence. If I'm confident, I can take a little more time. If I'm less confident, I'll take a little less time,
All right, guys, this has been a amazing episode with Anthony and David. However, it's running long. So we're going to break this episode up into 2 parts, first time for us. So this is part 1, and then you're going to come back next week. We're going to have the conclusion of this as part 2, and more great information from those 2 guys. Jason, I mean, a lot of information, a lot of big information being laid down tonight.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what's coming next is even more awesome than what you've heard on this episode.
Yeah, no doubt, man. No doubt. It's exciting, and we can't thank David and Anthony enough for taking the time. It's been a late and long night, but I think it's well been worth it.
That's right. And thank you to Game Boy, Negrini, RE Ranger, Atlas Traps, and Bear Pelt. And we will see you all next week.